All right, so with us again today is Tyler with the Dark Horse Garage. Tyler's guest on our program before, and exciting to have you back, Tyler.
Glad to be back, Dylan.
It is wonderful indeed. All right, so I have a question for you. A lot of the modern movements in our world want to portray that the father, being the head of the household, is something akin to the patriarchy, and it's really this idea that if the father is the head of the household, this means they have power, and usually the sentiment which is being conveyed is that it's some sort of institution for totalitarian rule by the father. But I think this is a wild misunderstanding of what it means to be the head of household. I think a better understanding of what this means is that the father, who is the head of the household, has a role of responsibility, which oftentimes means sacrifice. What are your thoughts on this, the father being the head of household and the idea of responsibility as opposed to totalitarian rule?
I think that's a pretty good analysis. I don't think I have totalitarian rule over the household. I pretty much have to break down negotiations on an hourly basis. Actually, what happened before we got this conversation started, my 4-year-old wanted to come outside and sit in with me, and I had to negotiate with her that I'd come get with her afterwards. But yeah, I think it's a give and take relationship. There's no complete control. I have some authority, but most of the time that gets overridden by mama.
Yeah.
And I just have to sit back and, kind of let it roll and pick my battles, but I don't have complete control. But I do feel like my responsibility is to make sure that the house is taken care of, the land's taken care of, the vehicles are taken care of. Anything else that I need to do to ensure that we can continue on for the next few days or week until Tori, my wife, gets off of work or something, and she can take over and help me out.
Yeah.
I feel like
Well,
there's a huge responsibility on me.
Yeah, there's a
to
huge responsibility for sure. And even where you're living at now, you moved for a better job situation so that you could better provide for your family. Is this not the case?
Oh yeah. That's a good topic there. Yeah, so about a year and a half ago, I decided to take a new position, and I primarily took it for the insurance benefits and the retirement package. Seeing as the health insurance was top notch, and that's a whole nother subject we could get into a discussion about as far as going off of like socialized health care versus job hunting for employers that offer better health insurance. But that's a topic for another day. But so I picked the family up and moved them 100 miles away from the rest of our family, and this is the first time in my life I've ever lived so far away from family. And so it was actually kind of shocking to me, and I was pretty uncomfortable with it, but it's gotten better now. But the family decided to follow my lead and come down here with me, and I felt like that was a responsibility I owed, or that a responsibility that I had, which I owed them, was the access to good health care, and it did benefit all of us.
Well, I think that's really such an important thing. We've lost the idea of personal responsibility in the role of the collective. We live in this world where so many people in our culture have a hard time drawing distinctions. They look at something like the phrase head of household, they say, oh, well, this is all power. And they can't see that there are distinctions from the role of the father having responsibility, but also when it comes to the practical negotiations of family life. It's pretty obvious that you and your wife both, you and Tori, have a huge job balancing the role both of you have. I know you play different roles in terms of parenting, but just the social negotiations on how the family operates is not a unilateral thing. It's not like there's all power on one side or all power on the other side, but there really is a balance that goes there. And I think there's just such a role of responsibility that we've lost. And I'll just get your thoughts on this. When you look at the culture around us, do you see that people have a problem making distinctions? And basically what I mean when I say that is so many people in their fight to push against the patriarchy, they say, oh, well, the fathers, they had all the power in the past, which I don't think that that's true at all. But they look at that and they say, well, our solution now is to remove all power from the father and to try to demean the role of the father in the modern world. Do you see that happening?
Yeah, I see that's actually, it's happening quite often here in our generation. I don't know if this is a valid argument or not, but I almost feel like that kind of goes against biology in its own relationship to the subject, I guess we're supposed to be the ones that do lead, and we're supposed to be the ones that are responsible for the family's outcome and everything else. And I feel like women tend to be more of the nurturing, family raising, taking care of the children at times. But yeah, it's a huge trade off. My wife, she works 12-hour day shifts, 2 days on, 2 days off. She kind of rotates out every few days, and when she's not here, I'm at home with the kids, raising them, feeding them, nurturing them, and whenever I'm gone to work at nighttime, well, she's doing the same thing. So there's a constant trade-off, and if there's something I need done around the house or with a vehicle, usually I can trade that off with her and have her do it. But if things keep getting stripped, I'm afraid that I'm afraid the outcome might be that men might just give up completely on even trying to take care of a family.
Yeah.
If you keep taking away, well, then what's the point in even trying?
Yeah. Well, I think that's one of the things which is so interesting about our modern culture is we have such luxuries here in the West that we've largely forgot a lot of the biological origins for how families are raised. We forgot the necessity it is for having two parents who are at home, who accept children at a young age, and how that is a healthy place for cognitive development. It makes for healthier children when you have a mother and father who invest in the children. You have a father who is saying, look, the world is a brutal place, and survival is not always easy. And I know that sounds really primitive to say, but the role of the father historically being, I'm going to take on the responsibility to make sure that we all live and we can all be safe. And the mother takes on the responsibility that says, I'm going to do some nurturing here. And we have a little bit different roles in the way that we involve in our children's life. But at the same time, in this modern world, with the trade-offs happening with the ease of resources, people do have a long time figuring out what is the good role of the father. I think especially as we watch how fathers are generally portrayed in Hollywood, there's usually sort of a stereotype of how that goes down. And we've lost this idea of good father figures.
Yeah. Yeah, the father, in my opinion, is supposed to be there, like you said, to protect, ensure the survival of the family, the procurement of resources, whether it's through money, through food, housing, vehicle transportation. That I feel like that is kind of more so up to us. But there is that negotiation factor, and that comes into play between myself and the wife on that. Just dealing with vehicles or spending money or whatever. She's got total say. She's got 50-50 control of everything. Most of the time I have to sit back and let her ride on that. But I do think what you're saying as far as the role is teaching the kids the importance of pretty primitive topics of trying to just survive and ensure our security and everything else. I think that is a role that I feel like I have to take on more so than my wife. I don't feel like she's ever as interested in that subject as I am. And all around, I do believe that statistically shown that the male figure in the household is extremely important to successful outcome in the children's future.
Well, sure. If we look at, there's empirical evidence out on this. If we look at what are risk factors for people growing up to be lifelong antisocial behaviors, and by that I mean people who are lifelong criminal, essentially, one of the biggest risk factors we have for that is not having a father in the household. Recidivism rates, which is the likelihood that somebody will return to crime, is just through the roof for people that don't have father figures at home. Having an absent father does devastating things to people. Even if we look at church attendance, people who are taken to church by their dad or their dad is present in church with them are much more likely to return to church as an adult, whereas it's kind of split, may or may not happen if it's the mother that takes them. Which for time purposes, we've got to wrap up this conversation, but I want to have one final thought I'll pose to you, Tyler, and you can tell me your thoughts and we'll wrap up. In this world where we've got such an issue figuring out the roles between the father and the mother, so many people want to say, well, if the father's called the head of the household, that's bad because it demeans the value of the mother. But I really think, and from the Christian perspective, particularly the New Testament perspective, where there is neither male nor female in Christ, but there's a value that is not in your fleshly birth, but in your identity as a born-again Christian, there's this idea that men and women play a complementary role. And it's not necessarily a bad thing that they are that there are distinctions between men and women. Women have a particular role they play, and it's not above, it's not below what men play. Women play a role that is largely connected to nurturing, which is a very important role. Men play a role which is more akin to protecting and finding resources, and women oftentimes are the ones who use those resources for different things. What is your thought on the complementary role of men and women?
I think it could be looked at as the head of household could be more of a joint task. Like it's something you have to set aside and both come together and make decisions on. Could we say that? And as far as the complementing, I do believe that you're right in that the women are there more so for nurturing. I know I don't have as much patience as the wife does sometimes when it comes to the children, especially at their younger ages. And I don't necessarily see her out there, I guess in a nomadic way, hunting and gathering resources for our survival.
Yeah.
As much as I do myself, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's just because I'm not in her shoes on a daily basis. But I think there is that compliment, and that really, it's a proven compliment over generations, thousands of years that has to continue on. I don't think you can really devalue the man and continue having a productive society.
Yeah.
Maybe some things will change here in the near future, and maybe people will start swaying back to the more traditional ways.
Yeah. Well, we're going to wrap that up there. I certainly think that the understanding that men and women are complementary to one another is the most appropriate understanding of the differences between genders. So many times people want to say, well, if there's difference, then one must be better than the other. That's not the case at all. But anyways, thank you for being here, Tyler. And again, just to give one more plug for your channel, The Dark Horse Garage. Thanks for being with us, Tyler.
Thanks for having me.